What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Spencer back with Anime Monday. It's been quite a bit of time,
A
Kev,
hot minute.
but we back in the crib, getting a lot of content done today, and we are going to talk about the Ava Rebuild movies that we just recently watched. I know the first one came out a long time
They
ago.
finally made their way stateside. Because, dude, I remember when we first started watching Ava last year, and we finished the series and then End of Ava and all of that, and then we heard about the rebuilds, and we were like, all right, let's get our hands on these, and we legitimately couldn't
It was
find
the
it.
Dark Ages.
Could not go anywhere to find them, and I wasn't gonna pay like $90 for a Spanish Blu-ray of it. So it's just like it was the first time most American fans got to see the Rebuild movie since they've made it to Amazon.
Literally 1984, dude.
It's literally been 3 decades.
But yeah, we'll talk about it. I mean, I'll be honest.
All right, so let's set the context here. Spencer watched, the rebuilds. He watched Shin Eva, Thrice Upon a Time. I also have just recently watched it, and we're about to beef. We're about to beef over our opinions of the movies. So lay it on me, Spence. What's up with the rebuilds?
I do not think the Rebuild movies are bad. I would not classify them as bad.
But
I don't think they're nearly. It just doesn't. There's nothing in comparison to the original show. Like
What makes
it
you
literally
say that?
pales in comparison.
what makes you say that?
The original, I mean, it is like massively depressing, but I think that's what makes it so special. Like when I view it in context, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
the creator, what's his name?
Hideaki Anno.
I'm not going to say
Anno.
that. Ano.
Yeah.
He was so depressed at that time, and
Yeah.
he's like well documented.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's like rare in art that a artist is that depressed and they're able to make an outlet of that. Like normally, like art, I think brings you out of depression. Like it makes you find the beauty in life. I think he like rode the wave with his depression to make Evangelion and End of Ava, and I just don't think we'll see that in our lifetime.
Interesting. And so is there anything specific when you watch the rebuilds that you can point to and be like, that's not it, Chief? Like that's where it's missing. Like what's missing from the rebuild movies?
It just has a completely different tone, like massively different.
How did the tone come across?
Like it's kind
to
of
you?
like ooey gooey at some points.
What do you mean? Like
Where it's like, ooh, let's get in these giant robots, and it's like, let's take on all these grunts and kind of run around and be goofy and all that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think. I don't know. Like,
the
did you
original,
expect it to be upsetting?
You
Like,
stay in it, and there's all like, the elevator scene and just all these like massively uncomfortable moments. I never felt uncomfortable during the new Rebuild movies, but like,
do you think that was like the intent?
of the original?
No, of the rebuilds. Like, do you think he was going to try and like communicate those things in that way? Because that's not how I viewed them. I feel like it was like they're markedly different from Neon Genesis Evangelion, but I feel like that's kind of like the whole point. Like we've talked about, that's kind of like why part of the whole point of why you would retell the story in the first place, because the whole point here's like for more of like the meta context, which I feel like is an important part of the rebuilds, the meta context of just like how Evangelion exists in the real world and how people interact with it. I feel like that's also a part of the story of the rebuilds, like how they've come to exist and like the actual story of the movies. So it's like when you have the methods in which the themes were conveyed in the original anime, you're right. Like he was super like depressed, and it was like a crazy manifestation of someone's really deep-seated anxieties and stuff. I think a lot of people, despite being able to like identify with those things, completely missed the fucking point. Like they didn't get it. It did not hit home for them. The main message of End of Ava was go touch grass, right? Like essentially, like you can't just keep retreating into, your fantasy worlds through anime or through, whatever it is you choose
Reality
to.
shifting.
You're reality shifting. Yeah, whatever it is you choose to kind of fill the void with. Like you can't do that. You got to go touch grass and experience the world and harden yourself through experience in life. And people violently rebelled against that sentiment after after Neon Genesis Evangelion started finished airing on TV, and so you make End of Eva, and the point kind of still doesn't drive home because Eva ends up becoming kind of like the one thing that Anno didn't want it to become. It was just like something that people were obsessively kind of engaging with and couldn't let go of.
I'm not saying that these movies didn't serve that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It was obviously like a lot more in your face, like just seeing Shinji just in general, like the way he is at the end of the movie.
Everyone's different, yeah.
Like he's grown up drastically and like kind of a more holistic character. So like I can appreciate that, but it like the thing with Evangelion is that it hit me like hard. Like it hit me like
For sure,
like
same.
a dodgeball in the face. You know that you're playing as a kid and you hear that tink, like that sound, like it hit me like that.
Yeah.
But I never, when I was watching these rebuild movies, I never had a moment like that.
Interesting. Because I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know if it's I'm at a different point to where it's like I'm personally trying to figure out how to like go to the next stage, like to move forward, you know what I mean? And so I think recontextualizing the, original message of the anime into the story of the rebuilds, because ultimately I do feel like the messages are the same. I feel like the characters kind of end up learning the same lessons, by the end of the story. Asuka, Rei, and Shinji all kind of, go through the same, they learn the same lessons, I think, in a less harmful and painfully excruciating way, in my opinion. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. I think it was kind of a way of Anno wanting to communicate that message to people in a way that was not like, brutally vulnerable like the original Evangelion was. It was a mature kind of, I feel like from a storytelling perspective, it was more mature and less of just like a, what attracted me to Eva was just how much of like a violent outburst of expression that it was. It is very raw. It doesn't kind of mince words with anything. Like it will, the things that people usually shy away from to kind of avoid, depicting brutally intense situations between, human beings. Like that, Ava went fully like into those moments, and they made them as every bit of excruciating and painful as they could. Like especially you're talking about the elevator scene, like. That's like the hallmark scene for Ava of just like kind of, what its quirks are. And so I don't know. It's a different approach overall, I feel like, to telling the story, because I feel like a lot of the story does in Ava, a lot of the story gets mucked up pretty bad in service of, Anno expressing, like doing these kinds of expressions, right?
Art at some point.
Exactly, right? And so I feel like the rebuilds serve a purpose to kind of like tell that, tell the actual story in a more mature way, not from the sense of like, the themes are more mature. The themes are the exact same. It's just like it's the product of, Anno being a vet in the game at that point. He had his own studio. He wasn't really beholden to anybody in the way that he was when making Ava.
Well, let's talk about some more of the specifics, because these are all aspects that I feel took it away for me, and why I didn't like the rebuild movies as much, or not nearly as much, is like the whole, like there was clearly a lot more fan service. Like the sexualization in the original is more of like,
I don't know if there's an argument there, dude.
You think
I really don't. I feel like it's kind of just, it's Evangelion, man. That's kind of just a thing you have to.
I don't know. I vehemently disagree with that.
Really, you don't think that
there are like sexual parts of Evangelion, but I don't think they serve the purpose to make you horned up. And I feel like that's
I definitely do think, especially Rei. I think Rei is kind of like the poster child, like the. She's the waifu template, dude. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, she became that, but I don't think that was his original intention.
No, I do. I think it is. I think it was. I think that was what Rei was supposed to represent, and the fact that she kind of doesn't ever get to change or do anything.
You feel like her nudity in the original feels like it's supposed to take like in a very sexual way.
I think both the context of the scenes in both of those in both iterations are the exact same.
Wow, I really disagree
I
with
do.
that.
I think that
And
it's
obviously, Asuka. Well, there was a few moments, but there's definitely like a bigger emphasis on the sexual aspects of her body in the Rebuild series.
I mean, that's just like that's anime, man.
And then the new character is like a sexual pun at that point. But I'm saying
You
like
want to talk about Mari? How do you feel about Mari?
she didn't really do she didn't really do anything for me.
What like in contrast, so it's like you have Rei, Asuka, and Shinji. You have your main three right there, and so let's talk about the arcs then, because I don't know, like a lot of this centers around for me. A lot of it centers around Thrice Upon a Time. Like I guess I'll make my stance clear. I think Thrice Upon a Time is like the crowning achievement of Evangelion. Like I think it is legitimately the like if you were to kind of culminate everything and hit on it, like that's what it would look like, you know, and it was really kind of like the satisfying ending, not in the you know, it was an actually satisfying ending. You know, I was satisfied with and you know the way it ended in Evangelion, you know, ended as a film. Like it was a fantastic film. But it still leaves you with kind of like that depressingly like surreal sentiment at the end, you know? So
It was very satisfying, the end of Thrice Upon a Time, for sure.
yeah, for sure. And so yeah, for me, I think
Definitely makes you feel better.
for me, yeah, I definitely think it kind of takes all of those and presents it in a way that people can actually understand it more, you know, in less of a way, you know, that it would be misinterpreted like it was in the past. So I guess my question would be kind of like, where do you think, as far as comparing the two, how the characters ended up, you know? So it's like Shinji in the show, Shinji in these movies, like.
Well, Shinji just grows up a lot more. Like he is like he has reached a higher level of consciousness.
Are
like,
you like upset with how the characters kind of like ended
No.
up? And they're not like
it's nothing.
not
like
that they ended up happy or anything like that. They all got the happy ending. I'm just saying like their arcs. Like, do you feel like they were kind of done justice in comparison?
Actually, I don't see it that at all. It's actually the dressing around all of those that I don't like. Like I'll tell you, like part of it, like I don't care about the ship battles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where they're like fighting towards the Instrumentality Project. I really didn't care like when they, you know, took out the Gundams or whatever you want to call them, and they're following. There's like thousands of those little like skeleton Evas or whatever, and fighting those off. That just kind of ruins it for me.
Why?
It's just like, it's like, you know, nothing's going to happen to them. It feels like Obi-Wan almost dying 5 times in episode 3. Like, that's kind of how I saw it. I'm like, oh, Lord, like, he's got to, like, oh, send me the sword, send me the gun.
I feel like, yeah,
I just don't like that.
When I watch that stuff, it's like, you know, Anno writes those scenes knowing that, like, we know that kind of stuff. Like, they wouldn't kill them in the same way. Like, everyone kind of, you know, serve at least the same role in the story, you know. And that's why I think a character like Mari is interesting, because you can't do a rebuild of Evangelion and kind of change up where the characters end up.
Sure, yeah.
You know, like I feel like that is kind of the essence of like where everyone ends up at the end of EOE is, you know, I feel like an important part of, you know, what Eva is all about. You know, and so when you introduce a character like Mari, like she, I feel like, is the only one who isn't beholden to that. She doesn't have to act on the behalf of, you know, how the story has constricted the characters in the past, you know. And so I think that is, she doesn't have to change or develop or be anything like that. She just has to help. I like Mari because she's the only like even-keeled normal person in the entire in the entirety of the universe, in the Eva universe.
That's what you feel like she added to the story?
Yeah, and that she was just like, she was like the one person that literally everyone in the show needed back then in the anime. If they all just had a person like Mari in their lives, they would have been able to like have some perspective. But it was just like an unending kind of like torment, like binge on all of the characters, you know. And so
yeah, I want to talk about Shinji a little more specifically, and like his character arcs.
What's the beef?
Well, I guess I just don't relate to his like arcs as much as I did in the original, where, you know, it's like
I feel like now we're gonna have to actually explain. Like, this is where we reveal that you actually just did not watch one of the one of the movies.
I'm saying, like,
no. I feel like this is an important. Like, this is where this is going to actually play a part in your opinion now.
So, like, in the original, like, he's obviously, like, very depressed, and pretty much that only gets over it when human instrumentality is happening, where he's, like, able to self-reflect, and his self-reflection, brings him to the other side.
Yes.
In these, it feels like it's so, like, up and down, like, there's, like, not even a curve. It's literally, like, levels of it, like, straight up, straight down. And it almost doesn't feel natural.
What moments do you think, like, made it feel like that?
In Thrice Upon a Time, like, he, like, goes out to that. Well, I guess it is, like, kind of gradual, but it does feel bizarre. Like, he becomes, like, too happy too fast to me. It's like no one gets out of it that quickly. You know what I mean? It's like once he's happy, it's like, fuck yeah, dude, I'm good to go, bro.
Okay, so here's the thing. You didn't watch You Cannot Redo.
Right.
So at the end of You Cannot Advance, Third Impact starts, right? And then You Cannot Redo starts. It's a 14-year time skip.
Right.
So it's a pretty big deal and then Shinji had been asleep for that entire point. And so the whole movie is him kind of like coming to grips with his hand in this, and how the world is. And obviously how the world is, by the time we see it in Thrice Upon a Time, everything is pretty fucked. And so I think the time skip between Thrice Upon a Time and You Cannot Redo is like a year or 2 years. Because I think Ritsuko says at the beginning of Thrice Upon a Time that it had been 16 years. So I think that there was even then like a 2-year point in between the beginning of the final movie and the movie before it.
I see.
So that, like I said, that would give Shinji a lot more time to kind of reflect on everything. And
yeah, but he's like way down in the dumps in Thrice Upon a Time. Like he's like incoherent. He won't speak to people.
Yeah.
And then eventually he's just like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think he kind of just, I don't know. I feel like there's a point in time where shit just clicks. And I think when we look at Shinji down like that, we're supposed to kind of look at it as, like, here we are again. Like, again, like, Shinji is fucking, he has, like, completely lost his will to live again, like, for the 6th time in all of, like, the entire span of Eva. You know what I mean? And, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of it has kind of just been Shinji trying to find different ways to supplant how he feels, or like whatever he feels like is missing. And I feel like I don't know, it's akin to how I feel like it goes in real life when you kind of self-actualize a bit and you kind of realize that, you're not at the mercy of certain things, certain feelings and stuff like that. It does kind of feel like a switch, and like it kind of makes your decisions a lot easier. And so that's how it kind of came across to me. And I know it probably wouldn't come across like that to a lot of different people. So I guess I can kind of understand how it does kind of feel like a 180. But I think we have an unusual amount of context for Shinji as a character, right? Because we have like a lot of like stuff even prior to the current canon he exists in, So it's like I don't really know how we can like examine it without like knowing all of the stuff beforehand. And I think Anno doesn't I think he wants us to view the story in that way,
as like just a straight continuation.
Not of like a straight continuation, but just knowing that like Shinji Ikari can't exist in Rebuild of Evangelion and not like, and you can't like think about or consider, Neon Genesis Evangelion, when you think about that kind of stuff, because it's like, especially, obviously at the end when they make they make allusions to the anime itself, and
that this is a situation that's played over like
the whole Neon Genesis thing. Yeah. Like, so that's where it kind of like made it clear to me that this is kind of like, it's more than just a commentary on how the story came across, back in the 90s, but also how, the message of Eva, has transformed over the years, and, what it really is all about, like, at the very, very end of it.
So let's talk about the different story. Obviously, well, I guess they technically could have, but I'm glad they didn't just retell the story in like HD.
Yeah, for sure.
That would have sucked.
That would have been weird.
How do you feel about the way that like the story drastically is obviously very different outside of having new characters? But I mean, like there's a third impact which doesn't exist in the original anime.
Well, there's a third impact, but there's also a near like they're talking about like the fourth impact
Right.
and shit. Yeah. It is different. Like, and I don't know, because I feel like it also kind of would have been interesting to get a fully fleshed out version of the original anime story, just because like when you finally figure out, like when you dig deep enough and finally figure out what the actual story of NGE is, it's actually pretty crazy. And so like when you watch the first two movies, that stuff becomes like, it's a lot clearer, obviously, before it takes a huge turn. But yeah, I think I'm actually really interested in what caused like the huge divergence, and it was probably in the interest of not making it seem like a retread of the original, but I was really interested in it. Like I didn't see like the time skip coming or anything like that, because I watched all of these pretty like going in pretty blind. So when I watch like with the end of You Cannot Advance, like everything kind of, when you consume everything as like one story, it was watching You Cannot Advance kind of was like, it was the most interesting experience for me, because like everything kind of felt visually, like it felt off, but everything visually looked very similar to how it did, back in the original anime. And so that's kind of like what I appreciated the most, of just like, it's very clearly intending to kind of incite those, those old sentiments about the original anime, but they're doing things that are decidedly different. The characters are behaving like very differently than they did at those points in the story back then, and then eventually they just like throw it off the rails, which was really crazy to me. And I think the fact that he like Anno was still found a way to kind of touch the original like end points of the character arcs is really impressive to me. So from a story perspective, I think everything is a lot clearer and easier to understand too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once you get to a certain point in the original, you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, like if you
there are certain
kind of
episodes that just don't even make sense
without like kind of like deeply researching what everything means, right? Like,
right, yeah.
And I've done that, so I kind of get it. But it's like if you were kind of watching it through, like you would have to watch it through a couple times to actually understand what it is that happened, and
certainly the context around like the events that are going on
Yeah.
in the story, because the original is more about the perspective of Shinji.
the story is kind of
So
just
like
a backdrop.
when he's like in
yeah.
the deepest parts of his depression, which makes sense. Like you don't know what the fuck's going on around
Yeah,
you.
like yeah,
Everything's a blur.
Yeah, as the story goes on, Shinji retreats deeper into his own like depression and stuff like that. And when you do stuff like that kind of more ancillary shit like is like that, no one really cares about that, and that becomes the only important thing. And that's why I did appreciate that about the original anime. And like I just said, I think this just exists for a different reason than Eva did. Eva existed as just kind of, like I said, a vulnerable cry, from a guy.
Yeah, just essentially saying like, if you guys didn't get the point, well, here it is again. So I want to wrap this up, and because I mean we've already talked about this, but so when someone asks you about Evangelion, like how do you just like, you got to watch the original and then watch the rebuild series?
Yo, I've heard of people who are just like, I'm not going to watch the original anime, I'll just go straight for the rebuilds. That's demon activity. You can't do that. That's like insane. That's actually nuts. I very much consider the rebuilds a part of the overall Eva story. Like they are they have a similar standing to me as the original and End of Eva. But it's like you can't just watch the rebuilds and feel like you got the whole gist of it. Like that's not possible. That's insane.
Definitely not for me.
Yeah,
like for me, they're not on the same level even at all. I can appreciate it for what it was. I don't regret watching them or anything like that. But again, I hold Evangelion at a different just level as I'm not an artist, but as a consumer, or like where I place it in my mind in terms of art. Like it's just like very commercialized Evangelion is how I view the rebuild series.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think the original Eva is commercialized?
No.
Really?
Not like this one was.
You don't think so?
Why? This felt more about like selling Eva like model figures and in action figures.
Damn, that's crazy, because that's like kind of exactly what the original one was. You know?
Oh, I don't know about
Yeah,
that.
it was.
I think
It certainly
I think it was so
dude.
big that it did, but I feel like they
Dude,
went in with the purpose.
That's nuts. That's nuts.
I don't-
Ava created otaku culture.
Well,
Like-
I mean, it did as itself, but I feel like going into the rebuild series, they're like, how can we commercialize this?
Well,
as
yeah,
much as possible?
like that's obviously always a a top priority when you do stuff like this. And Anno has like talked about how he did it just for like, because he knew he can make money off of it, but like, yeah, it's just like a thing. He knows it's like how Disney would just make mad sequels. Like it's the thing that allows them to do what they, really want to do.
Oh, and I'm not saying I take issue with it. Like I get it.
No, but I'm saying like I don't think that just because those were like elements of why it exists, I don't think that takes away from how genuine or authentic the story was, because I do think that Anno put the same level of I think he suffered over this the same amount as Ava, for sure.
I don't know. Let's just get him on and we'll ask him.
I mean, he literally has said that he was like, "Yo, I'm mad depressed after 3.0 came out." Like he was talking about like there was a reason there was like an 8-year gap between 3.0 and Thrice Upon a Time, So
Yeah, it's just the tonal shift really like it hits me pretty hard.
it is different. If you're going expecting the traditional Neon Genesis Evangelion experience, you are not going to find that in the rebuilds.
I know we were finishing, but I also wanted to talk about the visuals for you. Like, how do you feel like it looked?
Really good. I don't know. Like I think you can pull some stills. Obviously, it's like CG. Like, you're gonna fall wherever you do on the subject of CG, but I feel like in order to accomplish a lot of what cinematographers or what directors want to do as far as action scenes, it's required at this point if you want to do those things and release a movie in a timely manner. You got to use CGI, and I've made my peace with that, and so I can find myself enjoying a lot of the CGI stuff. And I think even then you still have hand drawn stuff that looks on par, even better than the original.
Yeah, I really just don't like the CGI stuff. It just takes it.
It
away
really
from
grinds your gears, man.
Yeah, I'm just old.
All these newfangled computers.
When we were
and
watching
shit.
it, we were just like, I'm just old. Like I just don't.
Yeah,
care.
we were literally just talking. Like, you just don't like anime in HD. You don't like any HD anime.
But I get it. You just can't hand draw anime like they used to anymore. There's not enough time in the day.
You can't make these kinds of fight scenes with it. Like,
yeah, and I guess I just don't like those fight scenes. Like that's what it comes down to.
I mean, yeah, Ava didn't put the hugest emphasis on fight scenes during like the anime,
barely,
obviously,
yeah.
But obviously, End of Evangelion was a full-fledged
oh my god,
theater release, and so that got different treatment. But
like, I think End of Evangelion looks significantly better than Thrice Upon a Time.
sure, I think you can make that argument. I think it's a better looking movie.
I'm sure
for
nobody
sure.
will agree with me when I say that, but that's just.
I'm pretty sure most people would agree that End of Evangelion is a better looking movie.
Probably the
overall.
most beautiful film ever created.
Yeah,
Just visually,
it's
mean.
up there for sure. It's but
unreal what they were able to do.
I don't know. For me personally,
Oh,
I'll
like
probably
the way Big Ray looks. Ugh.
I would probably be more inclined to lean towards Thrice Upon a Time at this moment, as far as like the definitive end of Evangelion for me.
Really?
Yeah.
In your head canon?
Yeah, that's my definitive end of Evangelion.
Well, I think it has to be, first of all, because it exists, and it kind of like is like, yeah, this is like.
I mean, it actually is like quite literally
I'm
is
not
the
gonna
end
sit
of.
here and deny and be like, it's not my head canon.
Yeah, it's
It is.
quite.
Like, it's literally the end of the story.
It actually is the end of Evangelion.
Yeah.
Like actually.
So I'm not here to dispute that at all.
But as far as like the worthy conclusion, because Ava has obviously ended 3 separate times.
right.
So yeah, but for me, I
the
feel comfortable
definitive ending.
calling Thrice Upon a Time the definitive ending for me.
I can accept the ending, like for sure. Again, I just my final kind of conclusion on it is, I don't think there'll ever be another Evangelion like Neon Genesis.
Evangelion.
There just never will be.
Yeah, that's fair, man. You can't kind of recapture that in the same way, but at the same time, I don't think Anno was trying to, and I think he made something beautiful still in the process.
No doubt. So, all right, that's going to do it for Anime Monday. Thank you guys for listening. Other than that, that's going to do it for today's video, and I'll see you guys next time.